We ready to go? All right. All right, so this is... When you're in the minority, you don't often get to do that. So I am glad to have the gavel for today. I want to call this roundtable discussion of the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs to order. Today's roundtable will be discussing examining the effects of tariffs and trade policy on Alabama. And so I so much appreciate all our participants, but also to the University of South Alabama for hosting this roundtable, especially Nick Lawkins for working with the staff and making this all happen and helping arrange not only the committee, but some visits that we're doing today. So we want to examine this hearing, this roundtable, and I have to use the term roundtable as opposed to hearing. It changes the connotation some. The roundtable is a slightly more informal setting than we have when we have testimony and hearings. It will be transcribed, and at the end of the roundtable, we'll talk about the ability to submit more information. We've got a relatively limited amount of time with a number of folks here. We'll try to cover as many things as we can, but if we miss something and any one of you want to add to this, you can. The roundtable today is an opportunity for the committee to hear about the recent actions on tariffs and what it means for your businesses and for the broader Alabama economy. In particular, we're here to discuss the administration's actions as it relates to the Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, the 232 national security investigation on autos and auto parts, the 301 tariffs on goods from China, retaliatory tariffs, and the renegotiation of NAFTA. I am personally interested. I have been involved in this issue since some of these tariffs were first announced back in the spring, and interested in hearing about the impacts on your employees, your customers, your supply chains, and Alabama's economy in general. In addition, I want to hear about experiences dealing with federal agencies. What's working? What's not working? I will candidly say I'm troubled by the growing, what I perceive to be the growing global trade war that has been started, not the least because of the high cost of goods to Alabama citizens. Alabama is now an exporting state. More than 560,000 Alabama jobs are supported by trade. Our farmers spend their crops, they send their crops across the globe, and we're the third highest exporter of automobiles. That's a remarkable turnaround for Alabama's economy to go in a matter of about 20-something years to being the fifth largest manufacturer and the third largest exporter of automobiles. I've heard estimates from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that the trade war could have an impact on as much as $4.4 billion in Alabama exports. That includes $248 million in exports to Canada, $700 million in exports to Mexico, $183 million in exports to Europe, and $3.2 billion in exports to China. Obviously, China is a big market for exports in the state of Alabama. These are Alabama's top 4 export markets, and all 4 of these markets have experienced major upheaval to the regular trade patterns, and all 4 have imposed retaliatory tariffs on Alabama-made products. In Mobile alone, manufacturing jobs have grown by 30% and wages have increased by 21% in recent years. Trade is a major factor in that growth. Average wages for manufacturing jobs in Mobile are 10% higher than the national average. And we've not even begun to see the full extent of the positive impact of Airbus moving into this area. The Mercedes M-Class in Vance is the vehicle that started Alabama's modern manufacturing boom and has continued a reinvestment of Mercedes-Benz, Honda, Hyundai to expand and modernize their facilities in Alabama. And it demonstrates the effectiveness of the Alabama workforce in keeping up with the changes in manufacturing technologies. This past week, I was in Huntsville for the groundbreaking of the new Mazda Toyota plant, which will bring about 4,000 new jobs to the North Alabama area. So trade is a key to Alabama's growth. And when I think about trade, I worry most about the costs that we can't quantify, the deals that might be left on the table, prospective investments in Alabama that we may never know. Farmers are already at risk of losing markets, possibly permanently. I heard from one company in Pelham that wanted to get clarity on the administration's timeline for resolving the conflict with China. Instead of waiting for that resolution to come, they indefinitely canceled their plans for a merger that had been in the works for over 2 years due to the uncertainty that they were facing. But there's a different side of all this as well. Despite many concerns with the administration's current trade policies, I also understand the need to address bad actors. I grew up in Fairfield. Brent Sansing is here today to discuss the Fairfield U.S. Steel Works. I grew up in the shadow of that steel mill. I worked at that steel mill one summer in the cotton tie mill, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. About kill me. But it was good work, and it was great paying jobs, and it built a middle class. And I think at one point that plant alone, that whole complex, employed over 20,000 people. And so I know the impacts of the global trade war on the steel industry and where things have gone, and how illegally subsidized steel has hurt my city, has hurt my state, and has hurt this country. And it is a national security concern. A strong steel industry is important for our national security. There is no question about it, and we can't stand idly by. I do have to mention one personal note. I've got Brent Sansing here from U.S. Steel, and I am so happy that he is here as the head of the U.S. Steel Fairfield Works. Brent and I go way back. Brent actually, after leaving the Navy, came in as a contractor working for a German company named Forrester Instruments at the U.S. Steel plant. My dad hired him in that capacity. Dad had worked out at U.S. Steel, retired, went to work for Forrester at U.S. Steel, hired Brent, and who would have dreamed 25 years ago that his young understudy would end up being head of the plant and his son would be a U.S. Senator. So it's a credit to Gordon Jones, and I have to give a little shout out for him.
Indeed, sir.
So I think what we're seeing here, and it's so good to have everybody that's being affected by these tariffs one way or another, both good and bad. We have a global economy today. It's not like 100 years ago where trade was important then, but today we are so interconnected. We see it in our manufacturing, we see it in our exports and imports, we see it in every way we go. And what is our line between free trade and fair trade? How can policies that benefit some Alabama companies maybe harm others? And what can government do to help ensure a level playing field for American businesses and the American worker to make sure that we provide the best opportunities for our people? So I'll look forward to discussing some of these really important questions today, having a dialogue. We're going to start. I'd like for everyone, since we do have a number of folks, I'm going to ask Mike to start this out a little bit. If we would just go around my left to the right, introduce yourself, who you're with, and we'll try to keep opening comments to 2 or 3 minutes or whatever you feel like, so we can get and have some dialogue going. So Mike, take that away. Let me say at the beginning though, I very much appreciate everybody. I know some of you traveled a long way, all the way from Huntsville and other places. I appreciate that very much. This is an important hearing. So with that, Mike, take it away.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Senator Jones, well, thank you for inviting me to participate in this important discussion about trade policy and its impact on Alabama manufacturing. My name is Mike Lee, and I'm Vice President and General Manager of Nucor Steel Decatur, one of 12 facilities Nucor Corporation operates here in Alabama. Nucor is the largest steel recycler in the United States and the largest recycler in North America. We employ approximately 25,000 teammates, including 3,000 in Alabama. Nucor has been a member of the Decatur community since 2002. You might remember when we purchased and revived the shuttered Trico steel mill. Nucor Steel Decatur now employs 720 teammates who earn an average of $109,000 annually. In the last decade, we invested nearly $400 million in our Decatur mill and almost $900 million statewide. Our industry has endured years of unfair trade with an unrelenting flood of dumped and subsidized steel overwhelming our market. This has led to reduced production, weaker balance sheets, and layoffs. Although Nucor was able to avoid layoffs, everyone in our company is paid on the basis of performance. So when production and profits fall, we all take home less money for our families. For years, we fought back with trade cases and got duties imposed on nations that skirted the rules, only to see those countries cheat again by transshipping products through third countries. Then we filed cases to stop this evasion. This endless game of whack-a-mole threatened to undermine the entire U.S. steel industry and our nation's national security until this administration recognized that a more comprehensive approach was needed. The President got it right when he imposed tariffs on steel imports in order to safeguard national security. And the steel tariffs are working. When the President announced the tariffs, he had a goal of restoring and sustaining capacity utilization levels above 80%. In recent weeks, the industry has hit that mark for the first time in more than 6 years. Lower imports and an increase in the U.S. industry's utilization rates are indicators that the administration is achieving its goals. The steel tariffs are also allowing steel prices to return to fair market-based levels, which enables our company to continue to invest in our teammates, our facilities, and new technology. Since the beginning of 2017, Nucor has announced over $2 billion in new capital investments. Today, Alabama Steel Company has supported 61,000 jobs and $3.2 billion in wages. Therefore, greater investment by the steel industry will only continue to grow Alabama's overall economy. American workers can successfully compete against anyone in the world when we have a level playing field. We are not protectionists. We simply want other countries to play by the rules of the global trading system. The tariffs are serving as a tool to get them to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that very much. Mark?
Senator Jones, first I want to say thank you for your work on the bipartisan farm bill in the Senate. We're hoping that we can get this done before the first of the year. Please encourage it.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. Just to give you an update, we're working, and that bill's in conference, and there's a lot of things. If we can get this, if we can just get a couple of those little poison pills out of the way, we can get it passed. So we're going to be hitting the ground running next week to try to get that thing done for you.
Well, thank you, because due to the trade situation, we need it. I mean, we're already, our prices have been in free fall for the last 5 years, and this is causing it to even be worse. Soybeans are probably one of our largest crops that we export, and our largest customer is China. We're down 98% for the year. Those soybeans they're produced, they're going into storage now. Farmers are holding on to them. I don't know what's going to happen if China doesn't go to the table and start buying, but they're going to Brazil, and Brazil's going to be harvesting by the end of December. They may totally take us out of their market, and we've been working on this market for 20 years. Right. We're kind of in a situation where we're taking the brunt of this tariff war right now, and we're the least prepared to do it.
Right. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mark. Allison?
Hey, good morning. I'm Allison Edwards with Honda Manufacturing of Alabama. I'd first like to offer our appreciation to Senator Jones and his staff for hosting today's event. We appreciate the Senator's leadership on the tariff issue, as well as the support that Honda has received from Governor Ivey and other of our elected representatives as well. Next year will mark 2 important milestones for Honda's history. We will celebrate the 60th anniversary of our business in the United States and our 40th anniversary of manufacturing products here in the United States. When Honda first started doing business in the United States in 1959, we imported all of the products we sold. In 1982, we began building the Honda Accord in Ohio, and since then, we have produced more than 25 million vehicles in America, including 1.2 million vehicles last year. Additionally, 95% of the vehicles we sold in the U.S. last year were built in North America, with a significant majority being produced here in our domestic plants. This remarkable transformation is guided by a simple and long-held Honda commitment to build products close to the customer. Honda has a substantial presence in the U.S. with more than 75 facilities, including 12 manufacturing plants, 14 R&D facilities, parts centers, marketing, sales, service, and financing operations. Honda's deep commitment to the U.S. and to Alabama is probably best represented by an announcement we made just last week. Honda will be introducing a new SUV known as the Passport, and it will be built here in Alabama. But equally important to note is that the Passport not only will be built here, but it was conceived, designed, and engineered by Honda's R&D resources in the United States. Honda now has a workforce of over 31,000 Americans, of whom 72% work in manufacturing roles. Last year, Honda purchased more than $41 billion in parts, supplies, and services for more than 12,000 U.S. companies in 32 states. And our U.S.-made products were exported to 89 countries. Here in Alabama, Honda's investment now totals $2.6 billion at our vehicle and engineering and manufacturing facility in Lincoln, Alabama. In fact, last week, on November 14th, we marked 17 years since our first Honda Odyssey rolled off our production line in 2001. Since that day, Honda Manufacturing of Alabama has built more than 4.7 million vehicles and engines in the state that I have called home since my birth. Our 4,500 associates in Lincoln take great pride in the fact that the three products we build in Alabama, the Odyssey minivan, the Pilot SUV, and the Ridgeline pickup truck, have consistently been ranked by independent researchers as 3 of the top 10 U.S.-made vehicles with the highest U.S. content. And we won't be surprised if the Passport is added to that list. However, the potential cumulative impact of new trade policies is unsettling for those in our industry who make decisions about future investment. This uncertainty about future cost in an industry with long product lead times adds risk to doing business in the U.S. Unfortunately, Honda has been impacted by a number of trade actions. We purchase the majority of our steel from U.S. suppliers and nearly all of it here in America, North America. Despite our local purchases, the tariffs represent hundreds of millions of dollars in added cost. Our U.S.-built products also face retaliation from a number of key trading partners, some of our closest allies. To be clear, barriers to trade should be removed everywhere, but imposing tariffs here will put American workers, American consumers, American communities, and the American economy at risk. For this reason, Honda has joined other automakers doing business in the United States in opposing new tariffs on automobiles and auto parts. Thank you again, Senator Jones, for your support and for allowing us for this opportunity to participate in this discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Thank you very much. Mr. Jones.
Good morning. I'm Graham Jones. I'm with Aker Solutions. I'm a project director. On behalf of Aker Solutions, it is my pleasure to participate in this dialogue to explore ways which we can find mutually beneficial solutions to the recent trade policy changes. Aker Solutions is a global energy services company based in Oslo, Norway, established in 1841. In 2003, we opened a high-volume manufacturing facility in Theodore, Alabama at Mobile Middle Bay Port, where we currently employ hundreds of passionate U.S. citizens as well as our international colleagues, where they are dedicated to meeting the offshore U.S. energy market demands. The positions employed at our facility provide some of the most competitive compensation packages in Alabama. The facility in Theodore, Alabama primarily manufactures subsea umbilicals, as well as the ancillary hardware. Subsea umbilicals link the surface and seafloor oil and gas equipment for controls, power, heat, and also have applications in the emerging offshore floating wind market as well. A pivotal component of our subsea umbilicals is coiled, seamless, super duplex stainless steel tubing. a unique product only manufactured primarily by two companies, one in Czech Republic and the other in Austria. Since the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill, these products are manufactured to customized technical and proprietary specifications. Currently, there is not a company in the U.S. that manufactures or supplies coiled seamless super duplex stainless steel tubing, and there's not a seamless substitute for the material in the offshore application. Not all steel is made the same. Since 2016, we have imported roughly over $40 million of product into the Gulf of Mexico for the United States energy industry. The total import tariffs paid on that product was a little over $41,612. However, under the recently enacted import tariffs, Aker Solutions has calculated that our 2019 and 2020 direct import duties for products to be installed in the Gulf of Mexico will be $4,718,217. This is a 1,942% increase over our previous, what would have been our previous burden of $231,000 for the same product delivered. The cost increase resulting from the new tariffs will burden both greenfield and brownfield offshore energy construction, which could consequentially result in financial justification to delay capital construction investments in the Gulf of Mexico. In addition, the tariffs can impact our ability to export product as well. While we are located in a free trade zone, tariffs can have and are in fact having a negative effect on our international purchasers who are fearful of retaliatory measures by other countries. This affects how our business could contribute to the growth of GDP. In May 2018, Aker Solutions began the cumbersome process of filing applications for exclusion from the duty on imports of steel and aluminum articles under Section 232 in the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. The directions provided for the process were opaque, timeframes for the decisions are not specified, and finding someone to communicate with within that office was challenging. This creates another level of difficulty for financial and sales planning, as well as extra costs that could be reinvested in our business in the form of jobs. Following extensive information gathering, as well as a legal review of our applications, we were officially submitted 7 applications on August 22nd, 2018. The public comment period ended September 21st, 2018, and we did not receive any objecting comments to our applications. However, we have not received any information on the status of our approval. In the remaining weeks of 2018, we'll be importing critical infrastructure into the Gulf of Mexico for a U.S.-based energy company. The expected tariffs on that are calculated to exceed $500,000, significantly higher than the tariffs that would have previously been. Aker Solutions would warmly welcome a domestic qualified supplier for coiled seamless super duplex stainless steel tubing, but we are currently forced to utilize an international supply base that has invested their own capital to create a process which adheres to our customers' engineering and risk tolerances. Enacting a paradoxical program such as tariffs on steels provides no long-run economic benefits to the U.S. steel industry. It is a short-term resolution for a long-term business challenge. Innovation and the ability to adapt domestic industry business practices to a global market demand will foster an environment where domestic and made steel can remain competitive. If this process of applying for exclusion from the duty on imports of steel and aluminum is to remain, we hope there's a way in which we can find a way to make it better suit the goals of the U.S. economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say, today we have sent another communication over to Commerce asking for an expedited review of that exclusion because of time crunch we're on. So hopefully we'll hear something soon, but we'll stay on top of that for you.
Thank you. And also on the finding the points of contact or people to contact with, the Department of Commerce in Birmingham was extremely helpful, as well as the Chamber of Commerce locally as well, helping us sort of walk through that process. But they also did not receive any specific directions on how to go about this.
Sounds good. Mr. Clements.
All right. Senator Jones, thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's roundtable discussion. My name is Rick Clements. I am the General Counsel for Mercedes-Benz U.S. International in Vance, Alabama, also known as MBUSI. On behalf of MBUSI, thank you for your strong support of Alabama's automotive industry. I would also like to thank you specifically for your letter in support of MBUSI's recent tariff exemption applications. We are always eager to work with our elected officials on pro-growth, pro-job policies that support the automotive industry. I appreciate the opportunity to express MBUSI's views on the likely consequences of certain economic policies. Our U.S. operations are facing substantial challenges with respect to trade policy. The potential for new taxes, recently enacted tariffs, and the retaliation from China are all concerning developments. Today's roundtable is timely and important. Free and open trade helped bring Mercedes to Vance, Alabama more than 20 years ago. We now make approximately 300,000 cars a year. Our investment has skyrocketed to over $6 billion, and we employ over 3,700 full-time team members. Between 7,000 and 8,000 people walk through our gates every day. Last year, we announced an additional $1 billion investment that includes bringing battery production and electric vehicles to Alabama. It should be noted, MBUSI is the #1 exporter in Alabama. About 2/3 of our SUVs are exported, and we are the sole producer worldwide for the Mercedes-Benz large-scale SUVs. We sell to customers in over 130 countries. Our presence in Alabama has allowed Mercedes-Benz to achieve a balanced trade in the U.S. Our 300,000 vehicle annual capacity covers 90% of the annual Mercedes-Benz sales in the U.S. MBUSI relies on almost 200 U.S.-based suppliers, which collectively employ over 10,000 people. This supply base relies on a global network. The ongoing trade dispute with China is a top concern because China is our largest market. In fact, MBUSI is the #2 U.S. exporter of vehicles to China. The trade tensions have led to increased tariffs, making our vehicles less competitive in this vital market. This situation is putting us in the middle of a trade battle that could harm our U.S. production. MBUSI is encouraged that the newly negotiated USMCA will be trilateral. The new requirements do put an additional burden on our relatively low volume of vehicles. We are currently assessing and analyzing the new USMCA requirements. In conclusion, MBUSI is concerned that the proposed U.S. tariffs on imported passenger vehicles and parts will negatively impact U.S. automakers. The U.S. auto industry succeeds in an environment where there is certainty and predictability. Massive, sudden changes to U.S. trade policy cannot be quickly absorbed by our companies. Changes in our capital-intensive industry take multiple years to carry out. Today's American automotive manufacturing base is built on pro-growth policies that provide stability. MBUSI remains hopeful that the U.S. will continue its long tradition of supporting free trade and encouraging foreign direct investment. Thank you, Senator Jones, for holding today's hearing. This concludes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. We've now been joined by Jimmy Lyons from the Mobile Port Authority. You want to have a couple of opening comments, Jimmy?
Yes, thank you, Senator Jones, for hosting this event and this hearing. And we're very concerned about the tariffs, especially the shotgun approach that apparently is being taken and the subsequent retaliatory tariffs. Recent studies showed that over 130,000 jobs are affected by the activities of the Alabama State Port Authority, being Alabama's only seaport. We see those 130,000 jobs to some extent being affected by these tariffs. We've only begun to see small examples, and I could cite several, but I don't know that that's worth going into. But I think that we're just beginning to see the impacts, and what we're going to see in the future is going to be much more impactful than it has been to date. We've seen it in grain, we've seen it in our steel exports, we've seen orders canceled, we've actually even seen metallurgical coal shipments cease to at least one country who's been subject to the steel tariffs. So the effects are far-reaching, and has created an environment of uncertainty in business. Our automakers, who can speak better than I can for them, we are a vendor to the automakers. We do handle a lot of automobile parts and automotive steel, both import and export. Actually, we export a lot more automotive steel than we import. But I see all of these things being potentially impacted. And ultimately, one of the concerns that we have is the potential inflationary impact of these new taxes, which is exactly what they are. You can call them tariffs, but they're taxes.
And these tariffs and taxes are eventually going to fall on the shoulders of the American people. So far, companies have been absorbing to some degree the tariffs that are countervailing duties and tariffs that are in effect now, but that can't keep on very long. And at some juncture, it's going to get passed down. We're seeing it in some of our construction projects where construction steel has gone up around 30% this year, and we see further impacts. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of the construction activity we have underway right now involves a lot of paving and pile driving and that sort of thing, so it's concrete, asphalt, things like that are largely the cost drivers as well as the labor costs. But we do see potential inflationary impacts, and which is not a good thing. We've had inflation under check for a long time and being at reasonable levels, and I don't know that this economy can stand the further impacts of this. Thank you.
Mr. Lyons, Mr. Penry.
Hey, my name is Daniel Penry. Thank you so much for having me, Senator Jones. I'm a fourth-generation farmer in Baldwin County. My great-grandfather started the farm in '53, and my dad came out of high school and started farming in 1973, and I graduated from Auburn in '03, and I've been there ever since. Our farm is, according to USDA, is considered a very large family farm, which I believe about 95% of the farms in America fall into that category. Our farm has been struggling for the past about since 14 with prices. I mean, prices have just been down, down, down. We've got neighbors that have quit and gone and done something else. Luckily, in Baldwin County, our land is worth quite a bit of money for houses. So if I sell my farm, it's going to be somebody's house. It's not, nobody's going to come in and take it and keep the food coming. We should be in a situation right now in cotton in $1+ range per pound. So if I make 1,000 pounds at $1 a pound, that'd be $1,000 an acre. Well, that's about a level we could actually catch up some at, but because China keeps canceling their orders and we're completely out of the market in China, we're in the 78 cents range, which is where we're just breaking even, and we can't afford to do that much longer. We've been either breaking even or losing a little bit every year since 14. Just to give a little background, we grow sweet potatoes, and that's been really good to us, but 40% of North Carolina's crop, which is the largest sweet potato growing state in the country, goes overseas to the UK. So if that market is affected by tariffs, that puts a lot more sweet potatoes on the market that we can't handle. Some of the biggest sweet potato growers in North Carolina are growing broke. They just dealt with Hurricane Florence. So things are bad in agriculture, have been for a while, and I know that it's a matter of national security that we be able to grow our own food so we can eat. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Penry. Mr. Burns?
Senator Jones, thank you for inviting me to participate in this roundtable on behalf of Hyundai Motor Manufacturing, Alabama. My name is Robert Burns, and I'm Vice President of Human Resources and Administration at the manufacturing plant in Montgomery, Alabama. I've worked for Hyundai since 2007. During the past 16 years, Hyundai and its suppliers have invested billions of dollars in the United States, and I've seen firsthand how these investments have transformed the Alabama economy and created thousands of good manufacturing jobs. Some may view Hyundai as a foreign automaker, but I know from experience that we're an integral part of an American automotive industry. Approximately half of the vehicles we sell in the United States are made in Alabama. We export about 10% of the vehicles we make, helping Alabama become the third largest auto exporting state. When Hyundai decided to build cars in the United States, it decided to make high-value core components as well, like 700,000 engines each year in Alabama, and 650,000 transmissions made by Hyundai PowerTech each year in Georgia. Earlier this year, HMMA announced an investment of $388 million to construct a plant dedicated to manufacturing engine heads. These and other investments have created an entire automotive cluster in Alabama and Georgia that didn't exist before Hyundai. Hyundai and our suppliers account for about 2% of Alabama's GDP and directly employ about 25,000 American workers. There have been many significant developments in the U.S. automotive industry recently, particularly in the area of trade. The issues we'd like to highlight today include the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the U.S.-South Korea Free Trade Agreement, and Section 232 investigation of imported auto and auto parts. As a global company that supports free trade, Hyundai is pleased that the trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico remains a trilateral agreement, as there is important active trade between the three countries. Automakers and suppliers alike now have the ability to assess the impact of new rules as opposed to trying to evaluate hypotheticals. At the same time, the U.S. auto industry at large is facing challenges with the current Section 232 tariffs on steel and is awaiting a decision on the Section 232 investigation of imported autos and auto parts. Substantial tariffs on automotive imports under Section 232 could have a devastating effect on the U.S. auto industry. While we are constantly working towards additional part localization, it is impossible to change the supply chain overnight. A 25% tariff on parts would raise production costs at our Alabama factory by about 10% annually, which would force us to raise prices and cut production. A lot of Alabamians, my friends and neighbors, could lose their jobs. A tariff on imported vehicles could force U.S. consumers to spend thousands of dollars more for a car and hundreds more for automotive routine maintenance. Imports are just one part of our American operations, but they're vital to the success of all the others. The renegotiated chorus confirmed imports from Korea do not pose a national security threat to the United States. The commitments in the agreement cover tariff and non-tariff barriers, promote free and fair trade, and will benefit the U.S. auto industry. Hyundai, and I'm sure the entire auto industry, are hoping that Congress and administration will commit to advancing proposals that retain a common sense approach to free trade and the elimination of trade barriers for the long-term benefit of U.S. manufacturing. So again, thank you, Senator Jones, for your dedicated leadership and for arranging this roundtable meeting to discuss the important trade issues facing Alabama manufacturing and agriculture.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you. My name is David Fernandez. I'm the president of the Toyota Alabama plant in Huntsville. It's an engine plant. And Senator Jones, thank you so much for hosting this roundtable. It's amazing to me the consistent themes that you're hearing from all of us. And it's amazing to me that, you know, we weren't together and made our notes. So I'm going to repeat some things that I've heard for the record, which I think is really interesting. But before I talk about the impact of tariffs and benefits of trade, let me share a little bit about the driving force behind our plant in Huntsville. We have 1,400 team members at that plant. They manufacture over 700,000 engines, 3,000 engines a day. And of course, it's the best engines in the world. We have experienced 4 expansions since 2003 and have invested over $1 billion in Alabama, and we continue to see growth. You mentioned just last week at the groundbreaking, in 2021, 4,000 more Alabama team members will build 300,000 vehicles at the newest vehicle assembly plant in Huntsville, the Mazda-Toyota manufacturing joint venture. That means our combined investment in Alabama will be $2.6 billion. So this is just a snapshot of the footprint in Alabama. In fact, Toyota has been part of the cultural fabric of the U.S. for more than 60 years. We've created a tremendous value chain with $25 billion in direct investment, 10 assembly plants, nearly 1,500 dealerships, and over 137,000 employees that work across the U.S. So trade has helped us achieve this success. We know we cannot have a growing economy or lift the wages or incomes of our citizens unless we continue to reach beyond our borders and sell, produce, and provide goods and services to people who live outside the United States. The engines we manufacture at my plant in Alabama are shipped across the globe, including Canada and Mexico. More specifically, the North America Free Trade Agreement has fueled the growth of Alabama's economy. Up to 14 million U.S. jobs are supported by NAFTA, including 200,000 jobs in Alabama. In addition, annually, Alabama exports more than $6 billion to Mexico and Canada. The new agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada that is expected to replace the current NAFTA will build on the success of the past. Since NAFTA, we've increased U.S. jobs by 80%. We've added 8 plants in the U.S., and again, we just broke ground on our latest plant in Huntsville, Alabama. There's no question, NAFTA has played a critical role in making North America a global automotive hub for design, engineering, and manufacturing. But I believe we're still not out of the woods. The new USMCA still needs to be signed and then ratified by all 3 countries. Until that happens, the risk of withdrawal still remains. Now I'll switch to a more timely topic, tariffs. We believe tariffs are just another way of saying taxes. We know the impact that taxes have on our entire industry. We're already seeing it in the steel and aluminum tariffs that went into effect earlier this year under Section 232, provision at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Our business philosophy and purchasing strategy has always been to build where we sell and to build where we build. That's why more than 90% of our steel comes from the U.S. Now, we hear about import tariffs on vehicles and auto parts and the idea that our imports are national security, and personally, that's very frustrating. The idea that 137,000 hardworking Americans at our facilities, our supplier network, and at our dealers across the country could be considered a national threat, that's impossible. But beyond that, tacking a 25% tax to all cars and car parts imported in the U.S. is a direct hit by the government on an otherwise healthy industry, an industry that's been a driving force in America for more than 100 years. The bottom line is prices will go up. For example, our Camry prices will go up by $1,800. Potentially our Tundra prices will go up by $2,800. That's just passing the cost to the customer. While Toyota sources most of its key parts and components locally, not all of these parts are available from U.S. suppliers. There is no vehicle in America, whether it's Toyota, GM, Ford, Hyundai, that's sole sourced from exclusive U.S. parts and components. Our industry relies on manufacturing supply chains that span the globe. Just imagine there's 15,000 individual parts that go into a single vehicle. It's clear that changes to our global supply chain cannot be done overnight. So we are taking a stand against tariffs, and we continue to do so with everything we can to make sure that it doesn't become a reality. If we want Alabama to continue to grow, if we want to generate stable jobs and economic growth, make Alabama a place that attracts new business and improves our standard of living, we need to join together and support free and fair trade. Thank you for hosting this roundtable.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Mr. Sansing.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Senator Jones. Thank you to you, your staff, and the university for hosting the event this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to share U.S. Steel's perspective on the importance of enforcing our trade laws and ensuring the national and economic security of our great country. I've worked on site at U.S. Steel Fairfield Works for 30 years and currently serve as General Manager of Tubular Operations here in the U.S. U.S. Steel has operated in Jefferson County, Alabama for over a century, and I'm a third generation of my family to work for the company. Currently, almost 800 employees work at Fairfield, but that's a significant reduction from just a few years ago. However, due to the early impact of Section 232 action, there is now optimism for the potential to expand and create new jobs. Across the country, U.S. Steel employs over 17,000 men and women. The products we manufacture for the oil and gas, automotive, appliance, container, and construction industries are proudly mined, melted, and made in the USA. Cheap foreign steel has targeted Americans' open markets for decades, but beginning in 2014, we were hit with a tsunami of imports. At U.S. Steel, thousands of workers were laid off, including hundreds here in Alabama. In 2015, the difficult decision was made to permanently shut down the Fairfield blast furnace. For the first time since 1907, the melting and making of raw steel went completely cold in Fairfield. A facility capable of producing over 2 million tons of raw steel annually was demolished, and the construction of an electric arc furnace was placed on hold. In tubular operations alone, over 2,000 employees were laid off, and over 50% of our tubular facilities were closed. This is the context in which President Trump's 232 action should be measured. The status quo approaches to steel imports were failing our country's security. The actions have begun to level the playing field. In recent months, U.S. Steel has restarted 2 blast furnaces in Granite City, Illinois. They had sat idle for over 2 years. Now 800 workers are back on the job producing over 2 million tons of steel a year. Here in Alabama, there's high interest in the potential to resume construction of our electric arc furnace, which will create hundreds of new jobs. The United States cannot afford to outsource an industry as vital to our national and economic security as steel. During an emergency, we need steel making here at home, not awaiting delivery from overseas. We need American-made steel to rebuild our bridges and infrastructure and to harness and transport our energy resources. America cannot achieve energy independence if we are reliant on foreign steel to develop our own energy resources. As the 232 moves forward and is refined, it's critical to not lose sight of the harm inflicted on American steelmaking and jobs by foreign imports. U.S. Steel has fought through the years of unfair trade attacks and is now investing in our people, processes, and products to revitalize and innovate for the future. We're committed to providing the advanced solutions our customers need for America to lead the world in manufacturing. U.S. Steel is committed to doing our part to keeping America steel strong. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Obviously, this is a complicated issue that involves not only the tariffs that are being imposed by our country, but also the retaliatory tariffs and an administrative procedure for exclusions. We want to kind of get to all of that, and it's hard to figure out where to start on all this. So I think I want to go back initially to my farmers because you guys are being really the subject of the retaliatory tariffs in different ways. Mark, you mentioned China and the markets for soybeans in Brazil. Have the prices for soybeans dropped over the last year since all of this has started?
Dramatically.
How much?
20% on the board, and then additionally at the farm gate where we're taking negative basis of up to 50, 60 cents a bushel. So you're talking 25%, and I don't believe we've seen anything yet. If they do not come back and get into our market, we're going to have so much carryover that we're not going to have anywhere to go with this soybeans.
Right.
And then the farmers are going to try to switch over to corn. Then you're going to have overproduction in corn. It's just going to be a domino effect. And our farms are so close to breaking even, or just, if our farms were not being collateralized by our land right now, most of them would be broke.
Right. And feel free, Daniel, to chime in. And all of this, by the way, this is a discussion. So if anybody wants to chime in, don't feel like you've got to wait for me to give you a question or something. I want to have a dialogue here because we've got some interesting, how the tariffs are helpful to the guys on the end of the table. That's why I put them there, in case they needed to run away real quick.
Closer to the door.
But so please chime in. But you also mentioned another thing about China, which is very concerning, and that is with all of the markets that we've built, but especially farmers. It has taken years to build those markets in China. And you might want to talk a little bit about those efforts. And my fear is, particularly with soybeans, but it also would be true with a number of things, China is investing so much money around the globe, and particularly in Brazil, that if we don't get those markets back in China pretty soon, they may be gone permanently, which would have a devastating effect. So,
yeah, for the cotton, got some information here about our consumption. It was on pace to set an all-time world record, and it is. I mean, they're using more cotton now than they ever have worldwide. And then in September, we talk about U.S. trade. India's cotton exports to China may see a 5-fold jump because of our, so India is right there. They had a great cotton crop, so they're just going to step in and take it, just like the Ukraine took our grain after the Russian grain embargo.
Right.
We never recovered from that.
Well, we've got a problem in South Alabama with cotton crops over there on the eastern side.
Oh, sure.
That just got devastated. I was down there recently, and that's just...
Sure, you had a drought in West Texas when they were trying to plant and grow in season. Then you had a wet harvest, so they had a terrible crop, and that's 7 million acres right there. That's the largest cotton growing area in the world, aside from India. And then you had Georgia's crop decimated by Hurricane Michael over there, and that's the second largest cotton producing state in America. And our prices have not have not reacted. The USDA cut our production by 7% across the board, but the export numbers and the ports and the shipments leaving the port are so terrible that our prices actually went down.
Wow.
So not to mention you lost half your crop to rain and wind and dry weather. The other half that you do get to sell, the price is not, the price is not acting like it should, because our exports are so terrible.
Well, and there have been some manufacturers that have moved their plants away. I know Harley-Davidson was the most celebrated one, but I've told folks it's hard to get a farmer to move his crop. It just can't happen. Jimmy, particularly with the agriculture, what are you seeing down in the?
Well, we have seen, and this is one of the examples that we have absolutely seen and will see this season. Our grain export season begins in October with the harvest beginning, and usually goes through about March, and that's when the South American crops come in, and the market shifts down there. But we normally would have handled in October 6 to 7 shiploads of soybeans going to China. We handled 3. We are looking at a very bad grain season, I've been at the port for 20 years now, and it's absolutely the worst, and not by a small margin. We could be as much as half of what we normally do. And one of my fears has recently surfaced is the new president-elect of Brazil has declared that he's going to open up some land that has previously been held off for farming for additional grain farming in Brazil. And as you mentioned, we lost a lot of our wheat market when we had to put the embargo on the Russians back in the 70s, and that really kind of put the South American crops on the map in Ukraine and other parts of the world. And what I fear is that we could actually be permanently displacing a great deal of our agricultural industry. Lumber is another agricultural product that we've seen. We were exporting a lot of pine lumber from the southeast, most of it coming out of Alabama, a little bit out of Mississippi and Florida Panhandle, but we're seeing virtually non-existent lumber exports, just dried up to nothing, going to China. And so again, they're going to buy lumber somewhere, and where is that going to be? Well, right now we could find our timber industry decimated. Right now they're able to sell. Luckily the domestic market is pretty good right now, but we're going to have another housing bust sometime, and when that happens, we're going to see some sawmills go out of business.
I think one of the reasons I wanted to start with agriculture a little bit here is because these markets have been built up for over 20, 30 years now, and it's one of those but the rug can get pulled out from under you real quick. And so the point is, everyone wants a fair trade, free trade. Everyone wants to make sure we're protected. And the point of all this is, let's just get it done. I think, Jimmy, you said earlier that it was the shotgun approach has just not been as coherent as we'd like to see. The goals are there, but the time is drawing nigh that we're going to, the uncertainty and the loss of markets is going to potentially be devastating if we don't move pretty quickly. So part of this hearing is just an encouragement to our trade representatives and the administration to let's just go ahead and figure out where we are so that we can get things done. Well, I want to move a little bit now to, and we'll come back, and again, y'all chime in, to the automotive industry. The steel and aluminum tariffs also affect the automobile industry, but I take it, though, that the real concern among our automobile manufacturers is really the automobile tariffs that are being proposed. This week, the President met with trade representatives and his staff and the Commerce Secretary. The report on the automobile tariffs is not yet available. They apparently had some preliminary reports, but we're not going to hear anything for a few more months, it looks like. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the growth of the industry, and particularly there's a couple of things that I'd like to clear up, because on the one hand, there is the questions, well, this is only going to affect imported. Those cars built in Japan, those cars built in Korea, those cars built in Germany. It's not going to affect Vance, Alabama, or Montgomery, or Huntsville. And I want to address that. Each of you can address that a little bit, of how these will affect the plants here in Alabama, and also where the markets, where you see the markets going. And as while we've got folks here, I mean, we're talking about the automobile tariffs, but let's talk a little bit and let Mr. Sansing, Mr. Lee talk about the steel and aluminum and how it might affect you guys somewhat. And we'll just get a little bit of dialogue. So let's talk a little bit about, the decision to come to Alabama. This is another aspect that I'd like for y'all to address. The other thing we're hearing is that these tariffs will encourage more manufacturers to come to the United States to build. Well, that's been happening anyway. I think we're sitting here at the table with groups that I think represent that. When Senator Alexander and I introduced the bill in the Senate about the automobile tariffs, he made a point of talking about the fact that Tennessee has also been so dependent on automobile manufacturing. So it's not like that the automobile industry in this country has not been growing, I think, by leaps and bounds. I mean, you only look. When did y'all open up in Vance?
A little more than 20 years ago.
Okay, 20 years, and look where we are in just 20 short years. So I'd like for you to maybe address that, and I don't know who wants to start first on some of those. I threw out a bunch of things, but I'll let you go.
Sure.
Mr. Fernandez is grabbing his microphone.
Thank you.
And also mention about how it affects your plants. The other thing we're seeing and hearing, everybody is getting new lines. You're expanding new plants, and folks are saying, well, wait a minute, this must not be so bad. Everybody's putting more money in here. So let's talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, for Toyota, of course, our decisions for expansion in Alabama happened long before discussions with NAFTA and tariffs and all those kind of things took place. So, it's been a long time that we've been talking about some of these expansions. The growth in Alabama is amazing. It absolutely is amazing. And to me, I think Alabama is a state that's really benefited from the automotive industry coming to the South and growing in the South. So I think that's awesome. I think you have to look at this as with a holistic viewpoint. Steel and aluminum tariffs, for example, is one piece of it, but we're seeing those are actually adding cost to our product. We're seeing interest rates go up. I think that's another piece that's adding cost to the product. And in addition to that, if tariffs come about at 25%, we're going to see, an additional impact to the cost of our product. So the customer, I think, is very important. So, what we see is when the vehicle costs go up, then the customer demand goes down, and that could impact everybody.
Could that impact your production of the new plant in Huntsville?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think eventually, if you take the long view, it could impact even steel and aluminum that may be doing well at this point, because if the demand on products goes down, then the demand on steel and aluminum will also go down. For our plant in Huntsville that's coming, the Mazda-Toyota joint venture, that's going to be a Corolla vehicle. That's a small vehicle. Some auto manufacturers have actually gone out of, producing small vehicles in the U.S. So we totally believe it's about competition. We want to produce the vehicles where we build them and where we sell them, and that's one of the reasons why we're building a Corolla there. But it's going to be a very price competitive product.
Anybody? Yeah, chime in.
And we agree with that from Honda's perspective. And also, just right now, we don't know what the rules are, right? So we have uncertainty. And so uncertainty means we're not going to make decisions right now. We're holding on. And all of our supply chains, our pipelines, take years to develop and take years to change. And right now, we just don't know, right? I love Alabama, right? I'm from Alabama. This is my home state. My family's been here before it was a state. I think it's been great for the state. But I think this is not great. And to say that that we're all a national threat? I just don't get it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I apologize, Senator. Hyundai is essentially a vertically integrated company because we do, yes, manufacture our own steel that comes through Hyundai Steel, through the Ford Mobile. And so for us, as Allison just pointed out, to change that supply chain overnight is very, very difficult. And yes, the impact of increased cost of steel does translate into higher vehicle prices. So we are certainly sourcing steel from U.S. manufacturers like U.S. Steel. We're probably in the realm of around 40% U.S. content right now. So we're making those adjustments, but as Allison pointed out, we need to understand the rules before we can make real business decisions, long-term business decisions. As I said in my remarks, yes, the USMCA gives us some guidelines. We're assessing those guidelines to understand how we can manage our business with the trilateral agreement. So we're hoping that that moves in a direction that supports us long-term. But Section 232 is just a very, very difficult situation for our company.
You've also got electric vehicles in line too.
That's correct.
And are those decisions, I know they're not on hold, but I assume you're also, the uncertainty gives you some pause.
Yeah, so it takes about 7 years for us to build a vehicle, and we start planning about 3 years before that. So it's about a 10-year cycle. And so, like everyone else has echoed, quick changes are not easier for our business to adjust to because there's so much capital involved. We're investing over $1 billion now so that we can build electric vehicles by 2022.
Wow.
Senator,
You can say something? Sure.
I'm not in a position to speak about the tariffs on the automobiles, because
Right.
that's not what we do, but I'd like to speak a little bit about the tariffs on steel that go into automobiles. And for just back of the napkin math, let's do some math. What's typical automobile, 2,000 pounds or something like that? So basically, $1,000 a ton average is what the cost of steel that goes through automobile. Let's just bear with my generalization. So $1,000 a ton in an automobile. Automobile is $1,000, it's a ton. So $1,000 of steel. The normal, if there's a 25% tariff added, which there is, we're talking $250. So the additional cost of steel that goes into automobiles is $250 on a $40,000 vehicle.
Right.
Yes, that is not zero. That doesn't seem like it's insurmountable, incredible amount of money that will tailspin an industry. Maybe, I'm a steel guy, maybe it will, but it just doesn't seem like that would. Maybe you guys can help with that.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact numbers either, but I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's just a compound effect of everything. So I think, steel and aluminum tariffs is one piece of it. I think interest rates going up is another piece of it. I think a potential 25% tariff is another piece of it. So I think it's just a compound effect of all this that's going to make it more difficult for customers to buy a product, therefore decreasing the demand overall. That's going to be a big impact to employment and all those other things.
Brent, you mentioned in your written testimony I was looking at yesterday that there has been some movement on this in the steel industry away from tariffs, but more import quotas.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit, expand on that, and how that might relieve some pressure? It'll boost prices, I assume.
Yes, it
but
should.
not to the same extent maybe as a 25% tax.
Yeah, for example, in the tubular industry that I'm so closely associated with, the South Korean producers are impacted by a quota, and it was based on previous years of performance, and they are, for the first quarter of 2019, they can bring in no more than 30% of that annual number, and in the second quarter it's the same. That's anticipated to help us achieve some pricing stability, especially in what we do, which is oil country tubular goods and standard line products. The vast majority of what we produce is U.S. land-based oil shale drilling activity. So that's oil country tubular goods and standard line pipe that move it from the oil fields to the refineries. the market had been so decimated by what had been imported that it literally was not a business we could sustain.
Right.
We couldn't make money in it. How can a company overseas produce and ship all the way across the ocean, import into Texas cheaper than I can produce it right here in Birmingham, Alabama? And that was the reality of what we were dealing with.
Now, was that primarily from China, or were European countries or Canada also?
European countries are not as big a player in our U.S. market. The Chinese and the Koreans certainly are, and they're very big in the business. And in fact, we don't know the quantities, but we know that because of the 232 that was put into effect, they have material sitting right now in bonded warehouses that will be on the market here in the U.S. January 1, as soon as the quota resets. And of course for us, and I heard it from the automotive manufacturers here, and Senator Jones, you'll appreciate, these people are my customer base.
Sure.
They're an important customer for United States Steel, and we want to do everything to support them. What I hear from them is the same thing that U.S. Steel feels. The instability in the market kills us, not knowing what's going to come next year or the year after, because we have long-term investments. Just like making automobiles is a long-term process with a lot of investment on the front end, so is making steel. Building facilities to manufacture steel is a long-term process, and it's very expensive for us to do. So for us, it's the stability. We need the market, a level playing field, and I very much appreciate what Mike said earlier. United States steel manufacturing can compete with anybody in the world on a level playing field, but it's been a long time since we've seen a level playing field. And folks at the table today are concerned about what might happen to their business. I can tell you what has happened to our business.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to avoid for those, and try to help you guys a little bit. Jimmy, the docks is also expanding for automobile. Don't you have a new dock coming in, or a specific area for automobiles because the Alabama industry has gotten so big?
Yes, correct. We're building an automotive handling facility. It's we're beginning the demolition phase, and would be online in mid-2020, and that's another way that we hope that we can support the automotive industry. And we have no commitments yet, but we're basing our investment decision based on the market that we had, and we don't know what that market is going to be. And so, but we're still going to go forward, and fairly large investment for us, not as large an investment in the scale of a automobile plant or a steel mill or a new line at a steel mill with its electric arc furnace, or reactivating a blast furnace, but it's still a large investment for an organization my size. And so it does cause me some concern. We open up this facility and there's no market.
Back to the automobile guys for a moment. The president talks about a goal of promoting more manufacturing in the United States, and we've seen such growth anyway, but is it really practical for global automakers to just continue to put manufacturing in the United States and not have it in either your home countries or other places around the world in today's global economy? I don't know who is best to answer that.
Well, I think all of us try to find that balance depending on what model it may be. Is it a niche model that may be better built in our case in Korea for global distribution, or is it more of a Sonata, Elantra, Santa Fe, which are consistently top sellers in the U.S. market, so therefore it's more efficient for us to have them in the market in which they're sold in, which of course exported, as I said earlier, whether it be in Mexico or Canada, or even Puerto Rico. So each one of us, business model dictates what is going to be best for us. So we look at long-term, what is the opportunities within the U.S. market, and that basically what is that break-even point for us versus bringing them into the U.S. market. So more than half of the vehicles we build in Alabama are sold in the U.S. market. and that could improve over time depending on what the market says. Any one of these automakers, remember 08, 09, he's talking about U.S. Steel, U.S. auto market took a huge hit in 08, 09, the Great Recession, and we had to adjust for that. So now we're looking at Section 232 and other activities which could impact the overall business. So it's tough for us to make solid business decisions with that in mind.
Can y'all address a little bit of what you're hearing about well, I'm going to call it the new NAFTA. There's new initials for it, for whatever it might be. But can y'all address what you're hearing about the new trilateral deal with Canada and Mexico and how that it might affect your industry, particularly in the South and in the United States and Alabama?
I can go first. So we agree that NAFTA, we understand the need to modernize NAFTA. It was an old agreement that needed to be modernized, and we certainly support that. It's not been signed. We look forward to it being signed. We're still studying it. So we do believe that it will add more cost of compliance. So we do believe even this, which we're thankful to have something, will have increased cost because of the increased compliance measures.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, specifically for my plant in Huntsville, 250,000 of my engines last year were actually shipped to Canada and ended up in vehicles that then came back to the U.S. and over 100,000 of my engines went to Mexico. So, NAFTA is a huge deal for our Alabama Huntsville engine plant. Without being able to ship products to those vehicle plants, which, Toyota is a big company and has vehicle plants in Canada and in Mexico, we have to have a fair trade, free trade kind of system in order to support our plant here in Huntsville.
Is the ratios on the points of origin, is that a good thing for you?
Well, because we're having to adjust, like everyone's going to have to adjust. But with Hyundai right now, we have about 100 suppliers in North America. We have 35 that are Korean companies that came with us and became part of the supply chain right here in our region, which I mentioned, that automotive corridor between Montgomery and Atlanta, or our Georgia plant in West Point. And we have some suppliers in Mexico and Canada as well. So generally speaking, what we've looked at is, as Allison pointed out, we're still assessing how we're going to be able to meet that long-range target relative to the amount of regional value content for each one of our vehicles. And so it's going to be an interesting dynamic as we work our way through that and try to, yes, we have an intent to localize as many parts as possible to go beyond the current number of about, again, 100 suppliers in the U.S. market to be able to achieve those targets.
Good.
Senator,
Yes, sir.
we were in support of the old NAFTA, and we are additionally in support of the new NAFTA, which is USMCA.
Right.
What we see it doing, and right, it's not signed yet, but we see it helping stabilize the use of North American steel in the manufacture of automobiles, or manufacture anything in the U.S.
Good. I want to switch gears just a little bit, Mr. Jones. You're coming at this from a little bit different angle, and you're dealing with, and you talked about it a little bit, with having to deal with the agencies to try to get some exclusion on products that are not going to really save a lot of jobs in the United States or protect jobs, because everything you're getting is there's no manufacturing here.
Correct.
Tell me, let's go a little bit more into, if you could talk about your experience with this, trying to seek this exclusion. I know our offices, maybe others trying to help, but what's been going on with the exclusions? Because one of the things that I've also been concerned about is that a lot of these tariffs get announced, and then there are just hundreds, if not thousands, of requests for exclusions, which there doesn't, again, seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason about what's going into making that decision. So can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, locally and from a state also, regionally, I guess you would say, we had quite a bit of support. However, the process itself, just even the application, is not very straightforward. So there's no timelines, and these tariffs are quite large on our product. So it doesn't, with everybody else, it doesn't really allow us to do any kind of financial planning or forecasting. You know, that combined with the price of oil per barrel, which directly impacts our bottom line, creates a whole lot of uncertainty. So we have the process of actually applying for the tariffs has been cumbersome, to say the least. I mean, there's no time frames on how quickly it goes through or who's evaluating it or what criteria they are looking at. Because in our specific case, you know, like it's a mouthful coiled seamless super duplex stainless steel tubing. If it were domestically supplied, we would be using it. So part of it is like who's evaluating this process of these applications and defining what is here, what isn't here. And the other part is who to speak with. There was nobody really directly within that you could reach out and touch to for questions on, you know, Bureau of Industry Security. There were some names provided on the website, but nobody really picked up the phone, you know. So it's been a really vague process of just sit there and wait.
Well, that's a problem.
You know, for our part of it, Senator Jones, we have no objection to companies acquiring what they need if we don't make it here. U.S. Steel's been an active participant in the 232. We reply very quickly, in fact, very timely. And we only comment on the items that we're capable of making, the products that we can make. Fewer than 10% of all the exclusions we've even commented on. So for our part of it, we're only going to comment on the items that we know that we can make, the products we can make, and we have no objection to companies going out and getting it if it's not made here. Maybe there's a market for us.
Do you know if, out of the 10% that you've commented on, do you know what the results of that has been? Have those been denied in all the cases or some of the cases?
I do not know, but that's something we can look up for you.
All right, great. You mentioned the new furnace that you're talking about. Would you talk about the changing technology a little bit in the steelmaking industry and how that positions you guys to be competitive in a price base that could help these guys a little bit? If we can get the tariffs under control and just get that price stability, it should help the planning for everybody a little bit. And I know the steelmaking industry is not my dad's old steelmaking industry. It's not the old cotton tie mill that I about killed myself in.
Your dad knew a lot about it.
Yes, he did.
He was very good at it. You know, blast furnace technology is very well known in our world. We take rocks out of the ground and we refine it to iron, and then we, you know, bring it over to a BOP facility, a basic oxygen process, and refine to steel, and it runs through, you know, for my part of the business, rounds casting, and for automotive and other suppliers through slabsting and hot rolling operations. And so, you know, the blast furnace, which was number 8 at Fairfield, very good blast furnace, one of the most efficient in the company, but was beginning to show its age, and we saw an opportunity to really revitalize Fairfield's facility in a way that was you know, going to be the future for us for the next several decades. The electric arc furnace would be capable of supplying over 1.2 million tons of steel annually. It would be directly coupled to the rounds caster and slabs caster at Fairfield. It really would have been, and I'm optimistic personally that we will do it. Our president, CEO David Burritt, has stated it's not a question of if, it's merely a question of when. But much to the comments earlier, we have to see some stability in the market. We've got to be confident enough that the remaining couple of $100 million that we need to invest are going to be a wise investment for our shareholders. And with the volatility in the market, we have yet to make that decision. I look forward to it. I'm personally very optimistic that we're going to do it. You and I share that history and background there in our hometown. I certainly want it. I've seen an awful lot in my career of U.S. Steel shrinking. I'd like to grow it. I'd like to see that return in central Alabama.
Even though some of the old-timers still refer to it as TCI.
Yes, they do.
Tennessee Coal and Iron.
Tennessee Coal and Iron.
Mr. Lee, how about up in indicators, Nucor, looking at any kind of, is there any instability that's causing y'all to hesitate right now until you see how this settles out in terms of expansion, or are you running and gunning pretty good?
Running and gunning? I wish we were. No, things are okay. They're better than they've been. Talk a little bit of history here. The U.S. steel industry, most of the steel, not U.S. Steel, the United States coal industry, annual production record was 150 million tons. Guess what year that was? 1973.
Wow.
So in the last 50 years, the annual production of our industry is now in the 90s, so it's down 60 million or so. The low point was 2009, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, like 69 million. So, I mean, it significantly impacted the steel industry, as we all mentioned. So here we are, 90 million tons. And China, for example, is close to 1 billion. They export, in years, they've exported more than our entire industry is. So, I'm making a long story short. Where are we? Things are okay. Things are going well. We are investing. We have capital projects around our company in Hickman, Arkansas, in Berkeley, South Carolina, in a couple of our different facilities. I mentioned how much money we've been investing over the last few years, over $8 billion since 2008. That's probably a little more than that. We think the industry's fine. We think if you look at GDP growth, where it is today versus where it's been, it's pretty strong. Our customers are doing well. A lot of our customers are having record years, or almost record years. 24 of our 25 top companies are having record years. We see 2019 being similar to 2018 as far as reliability of the industry. So, to answer your question, things are okay. Capacity of the steel industry is up over 80% for the first time in a long time, which is good. It's not great. I mean, 80% on a highly capitalized mill like a Decatur sheet mill or some of the bigger mills in our company, that's tough to make money at that number. It's easier when you have some of our smaller mills that aren't as highly capitalized. They do better at 80%. But for a big mill like Decatur, and I offer you an opportunity to come visit anytime you'd like to see what the new steel industry looks like. We offer that anytime. Come visit. But no, so we're doing okay. We feel pretty good about where we are today and where we'll be next year.
I want to turn briefly and mention something that nobody really likes to talk about, but we've seen a really great economy in the last few years. It has been steadily going up. Unemployment is down. Wages have begun to rise, although not as fast as people would like. Hint, hint, hint for all of you. But there's also some growing concern about the economy maybe overheating. There may be, that this is not going to last a little bit. And if we start seeing a downturn in this economy a little bit, how are we looking at a double whammy if that happens for your businesses with increased tariffs and increased uncertainty and maybe moving back, not to the extent that we saw in 2008. Hopefully that was that kind of generational thing is behind us. But I do think it's important to talk about down the road, because we don't know what the future is going to hold for the American economy today or tomorrow. So anybody? Nobody wants to venture.
I guarantee you one thing. I guarantee you the industry's going to go down at some point.
Yeah.
Our industry is cyclical. You just look at it since the beginning of the steel industry, back with your grandfather into?
Oh, yeah, and most of my family, yeah.
Okay, so since then to today, it's been a sinusoidal curve, and that's going to continue. There's nothing we can do about that. Hopefully, we never have a 2009 again. I agree with that. But right now we're feeling a little weakness in the market, but that's typical this time of year. Right. Seasonality, end of the year stuff. People don't want inventory, all that kind of thing. But what happens once we get into the first of the year, or when our customers' backlog get into the first of the year, which is going to be a couple weeks, you start to realize, oh, I need to order something, and the market will pick up. So, is it going to happen? I guarantee you it will. But that's just the nature of our business and the nature of what we do, and we've weathered those storms many times over and over again. We know how to handle it. In fact, when things get really soft and really slow, that's when we do our best work. And Nucor is an interesting company. We don't lay off. We keep guys at work, keep guys working. So when times get really slow, that's when we do all kinds of product development and trying to figure out how to make armor plate, for example, and things that are exotic that we don't know how to do yet. But we do it when we have the time on the mills, and we mess it up a bunch. But at the end of the day, we figured out how to make it so we can service many of the folks at this table with products that are very difficult to do. So it'll happen, and whether that storm will come out of it better than when we wanted.
Hopefully can weather the storm better, though, if we get a little bit more certainty on where we are on all of this. Is that a fair statement for everybody, if we just had that certainty?
Yeah, Senator, I'd just like to add to the comment. I think it's, I think we want to avoid things like tariffs to spook the market and the uncertainties around all those kind of things. I think that's at least what this roundtable is saying, is that, you know, the uncertainties are very difficult for us to think about capital investments and those kind of things that we want to consider going into the future. And I think that's why you see the markets fluctuate on a daily basis right now, because people just don't know. They don't know what's going to happen. And it seems like, you know, when we talk about tariffs, 25% tariff, it continues to spook everybody, right? It continues to just, there's like no sight of when this thing ends. And then for some of the auto manufacturers to be considered an automotive, you know, to be considered a security threat, it's just crazy to all of us. So, you know, I think basically the stability, to understand what's going to happen in the future would help everybody and would keep this current great economy going. Yeah, I don't know why we'd want to spook it, or why anybody would want to spook it.
I agree. We are about out of time, but we're not taking questions. We can't take questions from the audience, Glenn, sorry. I'd like to give anybody an opportunity, though, if we haven't touched on something that you feel like is important to bring out. Again, we'll leave the record open, but if there's something that anybody wants to mention today, I think you've done a pretty good job of talking about the effects on the ports. We've heard from farmers and we've heard the interplay, but has anybody got anything that we haven't touched on that you want to kind of add to the record today, and then you can always supplement it later?
I would just like to add, I just want to thank you, because you've been proactive on this topic. There's a lot of politicians that I think are staying behind the scenes, not talking about tariffs and talking about those other things that we're all concerned about, and I just want to commend you for being open and hosting things like these roundtables and being open to discuss it.
Well, I wasn't looking for a compliment, but I appreciate it. And I do hope people, you know, look, in all candor, I think part of that, you know, the midterms, you go into an election, it's always a silly season, and people tend to play their cards a little bit closer to the vest. Hopefully, as we get into a new Congress, we'll see some more activity. I mean, I commend my colleagues like Senator Alexander helping me with the automobile tariff, Senator Portman and Senator Ernst on the national security provision of these, because I do believe over the years, and I've studied a lot about tariffs, that administrations on both sides of the aisle have kind of been fast and loose on this national security issue over the years, and we're looking to maybe change that a little bit as well. So anybody else? I'll give you another opportunity. Mr. Kaiser?
Yes, I just wanted to talk about, we were already in trouble with low prices. Mm-hmm. This is going to take us over the cliff. We need them to take a hard line on negotiations, unified, and get it taken care of, because the only thing that we can do in our industry to survive is open up new markets. We've got to have these discussions with these other countries and open up markets for all the agriculture that we're producing in the United States. If we don't do that, we're going to see a downward spiral. We've been locked out of China for 15 years in the beef market. And they're not, when we were in 2003, we were the #1 beef supplier. There was a mad cow scare, and they have knocked us out ever since. They were importing 12,000 tons then, very minimal. They're doing over 1 million tons now, and we don't do anything.
Wow.
So we've got to do something to open these markets.
I do know that there was some discussion with the European Union about maybe opening up some markets, but, and then not, maybe speaking a little bit out of school, but it didn't seem like that it was very much to really make a dent. And then that's kind of been on hold a little bit.
Last week, their trade man said agriculture is off the table, it's a no-go, industrial goods only, don't even talk about it.
Okay. There you go.
These tariffs directly affect our way of life. And, you know, our business is a national security issue as well. So when we get a government subsidy or whatever it is to help our business stay, because, you know, you got to be able to feed yourself as a nation, it don't hurt the steel people. I mean, you know, this thing is just all of a sudden overnight, boom, we're in the crapper.
Right.
You know, and, you know, I understand.
That's a U.S. government Senate term, by the way.
We need steel in this country to fight wars and make whatever we need to make to protect ourselves, but good luck eating it.
Right.
We're going to get hungry.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're about out of time. I especially want to thank Chairman Ron Johnson and Ranking Member Claire McCaskill for allowing us to conduct this hearing here in Mobile today. And I want to thank again all our panelists. We're going to leave this record open until November 30th, I think, November 30th, so that if there is anything, your submissions written testimony will be submitted. Anything else that you've heard today you want to add to, or if there's something that we missed you want to add to, it will be part of the record and will certainly be considered. So again, I really appreciate this. This has been an interesting discussion, and I hope it kind of brings to light how connected we all are in this economy. That includes the port and things that you don't normally think about when you talk about the tariffs, the transportation, the supply chains. Everybody is affected by what's going on, and particularly I hope that it has really brought attention to the plight of our farmers, who are really struggling right now. And we have got to do something, and I am very concerned about their markets going away and going somewhere else, and that's going to be a major problem. So thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it very much. And with that, we're adjourned.
Nice. Thank you, Senator.
No, thank you.
Appreciate you.